She judged him by his clothes until the captain revealed who he really was at 35,000 feet. If you've ever been looked down on for how you dressed, how you spoke, or where you came from, this story is for you. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens at 35,000 feet in this story will change the way you look at strangers forever. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Now, let's step inside Terminal C at Metro International, where a father in a faded jacket is about to board a flight that will test everything a certain young woman thinks she knows about the world. The terminal smelled like burnt coffee and floor polish, and Ryan Cole thought, not for the first time that morning, that airports had a way of making even the calmest man feel like he was running late for his own funeral. He shifted the strap of his canvas bag higher on his shoulder. The bag was old, the kind of old that came from years of being stuffed into overhead bins and dragged across parking lots. The kind of old where the zipper only closed if you pulled it at the right angle and spoke to it kindly. His daughter had drawn a small, lopsided heart on the side panel in permanent marker when she was 5. She was 7 now, and the heart had faded to a ghost, but he refused to let Clara scrub it off. Some things were worth carrying. He glanced at the boarding screen. Flight 882. Non-stop. Gate C14. Boarding in 12 minutes. Sir? A woman in a navy blazer was waving him toward the priority lane. He blinked at her, then at the sign above her head. Business class and premier members. Then back at her. Yeah, sorry. He fished his boarding pass out of his jacket pocket. It was crumpled. He straightened it against his thigh like he was trying to iron it with his palm. The woman scanned it without looking at him. The machine chirped. Then she did look at him, and he watched the small involuntary pause behind her eyes. It was a look he'd seen often enough in the last decade to recognize it the way a sailor recognizes a particular kind of cloud. Not hostile, just recalibrating. C2A, she said, and her voice had adjusted half a degree, the way people's voices sometimes did when they weren't sure yet whether they'd made a mistake. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Cole. Thanks. He walked down the jet bridge alone. The carpet was the color of old wine. He could hear the rubber of his sneakers squeaking faintly against it and wished, briefly, absurdly, that he'd worn different shoes. Clara had picked out these sneakers for him at the outlet mall. She'd said the blue laces looked brave. He wasn't sure what brave laces were supposed to look like, but he'd bought them because she'd said it with that particular fierce certainty 7-year-olds had about the world. The certainty that made you believe, for a moment, that shoelaces really could be brave. He ducked into the plane. The air inside was cold and smelled the way airplanes always smelled, like plastic and coffee, and 40 different people's perfume arguing with each other in a closed room. A flight attendant with a tight smile glanced at his boarding pass, glanced at his jacket, glanced at his bag, and then pointed very politely toward the front of the cabin. Right this way, sir. He knew what she was doing. She was walking him up slowly so she could watch where he sat. He almost smiled. He'd done worse things in worse moods than humor a flight attendant. Seat 2A was by the window. He slid his bag into the overhead bin carefully because the zipper was temperamental, and then lowered himself into the wide leather seat. The seat let out a small sigh, as if it too was surprised to find him there. He rested his head against the window and closed his eyes. Just a few hours, he thought. Just a few hours, and you're home. Clara would be at the kitchen table with her grandmother, doing homework she didn't want to do, eating apple slices cut into shapes because his mother believed that food had to be fun or children wouldn't eat it. She'd have marker on her fingers. She'd ask where he was, and his mother would say, "On his way, sweetheart, almost home." And Clara would nod like she was being very grown up about it and then ask, 3 minutes later, when he was coming home. That was the part he was going back for. The marker. The apple slices. The asking. A voice cut through. "Excuse me, is this 2B?" He opened his eyes. She was standing in the aisle, tilted slightly toward him, one eyebrow arched, a sleek leather carry-on already half lifted toward the overhead compartment. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Dark hair cut just below her jaw, the kind of cut you could tell had been expensive without being able to say exactly why. A cream-colored blazer, tailored. A watch that caught the overhead light in a way that suggested it did not come from a kiosk. Her eyes flicked down to him, then to his jacket. Then to the worn canvas bag visible through the crack in the overhead bin, then back to him. He saw it happen. The recalibration, faster than the gate agents and less polite. "Yes," he said. "This is 2A. "Right." She smiled. It was a good smile. It didn't reach anywhere important. "Of course." She lifted her bag into the bin and settled into the seat beside him with the kind of practiced grace that told him she flew often. She crossed her legs. She adjusted the cuff of her blazer. She did not look at him again. Ryan turned back to the window. Out on the tarmac, a baggage handler was waving at another baggage handler. One of them was laughing. Ryan watched them for a moment and felt the familiar hollow ache of being on the wrong side of the glass from people who were having a normal Tuesday morning. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, sir? Ma'am?" The flight attendant was back. Different one. A man, this time, with kind eyes and a plastic name tag that said Brandon. "Sparkling water, please," the woman beside him said. "No lime." "Of course, Miss Carter." Ryan glanced at her. So she was a regular. "Water's fine," he said. "Tap." Brandon nodded and moved on. Emily Carter opened her phone. Ryan could see the screen from the corner of his eye, not because he was trying to see it, but because it was tilted toward him in that particular way. People held phones when they weren't worried about anyone else reading along. An email. Something about a board meeting, Q3 targets, acquisition timeline, words like that. She typed fast. Her nails were short and unpainted, and she typed like someone who had been typing professionally since high school. Ryan looked away. He thought about the presentation in his bag. He thought about the 8 months of 16-hour days that had gone into it. He thought about the 3 partners in Chicago who were waiting to hear whether he was going to buy the company that would, if he played it right, finally let him stop working 18-hour days and start doing school pickup again. He thought about Clara's drawing of him taped to the fridge, the one where he had a giant square head and stick legs, and she had drawn a little thought bubble over his head that just said, work. He didn't want to be work anymore. "Excuse me." He turned. Emily Carter had leaned forward slightly in her seat. She was holding up one finger toward the aisle, flagging down Brandon, who was coming back with her sparkling water. Her voice was low, polite, the kind of polite that had a knife in the back pocket. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry to bother you." A small practiced smile. "Just a quick question. I booked this seat through my assistant, and she's usually very careful about, well, could you verify that my ticket is in the correct cabin? I just want to make sure there wasn't a mistake." Ryan kept his eyes on the window. He knew what was coming. He'd been on a lot of flights. He'd seen a lot of versions of this. Brandon tilted his head, not quite following. "Your ticket?" "Of course, ma'am. But you're in the right seat. I can confirm that. You're—" No. I know I'm in the right seat." Her voice dropped lower. "I mean, could you just verify it? That I'm in the right cabin, because I don't want to be presumptuous, but I'd hate to have someone around me later realize they were in the wrong section, and then there's a whole, incident." Ryan almost laughed. It was the word incident that did it. She had used the word incident the way a surgeon uses the word procedure. Clean. Technical. A little sterile, as if what she was doing was some kind of civic duty. Brandon was staring at her. Ryan could see the exact moment Brandon understood. The young man's eyes moved, just for a fraction of a second, toward Ryan, then back to her, then down at his water tray. "Ma'am, everyone in this cabin has a verified ticket. I'd be happy to get the lead attendant if you have any. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much." Brandon nodded, carefully, and walked away. Emily settled back into her seat. She crossed her legs the other direction. She opened her phone and typed something else very quickly. Ryan finally turned his head. "You can just ask me," he said. Quiet. Not unfriendly, just flat. Her head snapped toward him. "I'm sorry? If you want to know whether I have a ticket for this seat, you can just ask me." A pause. Her lips parted, then closed, then opened again, and the polished version of her voice came out of them, the version he suspected she used on underlings and caterers. I have no idea what you're talking about. I was asking about my ticket." He looked at her. He didn't say anything. She looked back, her chin lifted by about 1/4 of an inch. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," she said. "Sure," he said. "Let's call it that." He turned back to the window. Outside, the baggage handlers had stopped laughing. The lead flight attendant was a woman in her mid-50s named Patricia, whose silver hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it looked architectural. She came down the aisle with Brandon trailing behind her and stopped politely at Ryan's row. "Good morning, folks. I understand there's a question about seating?" Emily looked up. Her smile was back, warm now, cooperative. A different kind of smile than she'd used on Brandon. This one said, "I'm reasonable. I'm on your side. Let's solve this together." "I was just saying," she began, "that I wanted to make sure this is a 3-cabin flight, right? I know sometimes there's overbooking, and the last thing anyone wants is for someone to be asked to move mid-flight, which is so embarrassing for everyone involved. I just thought if there was a clerical issue, it would be better to address it before we take off." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Ryan. Ryan did not look away from the window. "Sir," Patricia said carefully, "would you mind if I took a quick look at your boarding pass?" He reached into his jacket pocket without turning his head and held it out in the aisle. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at Emily. He watched a catering truck back slowly away from the wing. Patricia took the pass. He heard the faint crinkle as she unfolded it. He heard a long pause. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she said. "Everything's in order. Enjoy your flight." She handed it back. He took it. He did not look at her face. He didn't need to. Patricia turned to Emily. "Ma'am, all seating assignments in this cabin are verified. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No." Emily smiled again. The smile had a new, harder edge now. "No, I just wanted to be sure." "Of course." Patricia walked away. Brandon hovered for half a second, then walked away too. The silence in row 2 got bigger. It spread out into the whole cabin. Or maybe that was just Ryan's imagination. It was hard to tell sometimes how much of what he felt was actually in the room. He tucked the boarding pass back into his jacket. He noticed idly that his fingers were steady. He remembered a period in his life when they wouldn't have been. He remembered a period when a woman like Emily Carter saying the word incident within earshot of him would have made his whole body clench. He was grateful, not for the first time, for the slow, quiet grind of the last 10 years, which had taken a lot from him but had given him, in exchange, a very unshakable set of hands. He closed his eyes. Clara, he thought. Apple slices. Marker. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video played. The flight attendants walked the aisles, doing the little pantomime with the oxygen masks. Emily Carter did not look at the flight attendants. She looked at her phone. Ryan watched her from the corner of his eye. She was typing again, but slower now. She was frowning at the screen. Once her eyes flickered up, not to him, but to the cockpit door, which was closed. Then back down. He thought, she's not done. He was right. They had been in the air for maybe 20 minutes. Just long enough for the seatbelt sign to blink off. Just long enough for Patricia to start moving down the aisle with the drink cart. When Emily Carter stood up. She didn't excuse herself. She didn't say anything to him. She just slid out of her seat in that fluid, practiced way she had and walked up the aisle toward the front galley. Ryan watched her go. She was polite. He'd give her that. She waited until Patricia was setting down a glass, and then she leaned in, and Ryan couldn't hear what she said, but he could see Patricia's back stiffen. He could see Brandon, who was stacking cups, go very still. Then Patricia nodded. Once. And picked up the intercom phone by the galley wall. She dialed 3 digits. She murmured something into it. She hung up. Emily came back down the aisle. She was not smiling now. She slipped into her seat and crossed her legs and opened her phone and did not look at Ryan Cole. Ryan said nothing. 30 seconds later, the cockpit door opened. The captain was tall. That was the first thing Ryan noticed. He ducked coming through the doorway. He had white hair at his temples and a navy uniform with 4 gold stripes on each sleeve and a face that had been doing this a very long time. His name tag said Captain D. Marshall. He came down the aisle slowly, with the careful gait of a man who knew that every passenger he passed was watching him and wondering what was wrong. He stopped at row 2. He crouched down beside Ryan's seat, not standing over him, crouching. Ryan noted that and filed it away. "Mr. Cole?" The captain's voice was low, gentle, apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir. I wonder if I could have a quiet word." Ryan looked at him. "Sure. Thank you. The captain glanced very briefly at Emily, then back. I wanted to speak to you personally rather than send one of the crew. There's been a question raised about the seating in this cabin, and in the interest of keeping the flight smooth for everyone, I wondered if you might be willing to accommodate a small change. Ryan didn't blink. You want me to move? The captain's jaw tightened just a fraction. I want to make sure every passenger on this flight has a comfortable ride, Mr. Cole. That's my only job up there. And the question that's been raised is nothing I can act on, sir. Your ticket is valid. Your seat is yours. I want to be very clear about that. But, the captain exhaled. But occasionally, sir, when there's tension in a cabin, I'll ask a passenger, any passenger as a personal favor, whether they'd be open to a courtesy reseat. We have an open seat in Economy Plus. I'd personally upgrade your return flight, and a voucher, but only, sir, if you were willing. Nobody has the authority to make you move. Least of all me. Ryan looked past the captain's shoulder. Emily Carter was staring straight ahead. She was not looking at him. She was not looking at the captain. She had her chin up and her jaw set, and a faint red flush was climbing up the side of her neck that she probably didn't know about. He felt a lot of things in that moment. He felt them all at once, the way you sometimes do, and he sorted them, fast, the way he'd learned to sort things. He felt angry. That was real. He let it sit. He felt tired. That was also real. He let it sit. He felt, and this one surprised him, a small, crooked kind of pity. Not for himself. For the captain, who had a good face and did not want to be crouched in this aisle. For Patricia, who had not met his eyes when she handed back his boarding pass. For Brandon, even, who had understood it right away and had not known what to do. He did not feel pity for Emily Carter. Not yet. He did feel something, though. He felt a small, steady curiosity. The kind he felt sometimes when he was about to buy into a new company, and he was watching the founder across a conference table, and he was beginning to see, around the edges of what they were saying, the shape of who they really were. He wanted to know who she was. And you didn't learn who people were by fighting with them at 35,000 feet. You learned who they were by watching what they did when they thought they had won. Captain, Ryan said quietly. Yes, sir. I'll move. The captain's head came up. Sir, you don't have to. I know I don't. A pause. I'll move, Ryan said again. Not because anyone has the right to ask, but because I want to get home to my daughter, and I don't want to spend 4 hours listening to you negotiate with the woman next to me. Just tell Patricia. I'll take the aisle seat. Keep the voucher. The captain looked at him for a long moment. Ryan could not quite read what was on the man's face. Something that wasn't quite respect. Something that wasn't quite regret. Something in between. Mr. Cole, the captain said very quietly, I want you to know I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm sorry anyway. Ryan almost smiled. That's the difference between you and her. The captain's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly, toward Emily, then back. He did not answer. He didn't need to. He stood up. Ryan unbuckled his seatbelt. He reached up into the overhead bin carefully, coaxing the temperamental zipper of his canvas bag shut before lifting it down. The faded heart Clara had drawn on the side caught the overhead light for half a second. He turned and walked down the aisle. He did not look at Emily Carter as he passed her. He did not need to. Emily sat very still. She waited for the relief to come. It didn't. She watched him walk past her out of the corner of her eye. The worn canvas bag, the faded blue laces, the sleeve of his jacket brushing the edge of her armrest. And she waited for the small, satisfied click she usually got when a problem resolved itself in her favor. It didn't come. Instead, something else came. She felt very suddenly and very specifically like she had just been studied, not argued with, not resented, not confronted, studied, like a slide under a microscope. The man had not raised his voice. He had not raised his hand. He had not even looked at her when he stood up. He had simply absorbed the situation, the way certain kinds of men absorbed situations, and then he had walked away. And as he walked past her, she caught the faintest glimpse of his face in profile, and what she saw there was not embarrassment. It was attention. He had been paying attention to her the whole time. Her stomach turned, once, softly, like a page being flipped. She reached for her sparkling water. The glass was still half full. Her hand was, to her considerable annoyance, not entirely steady. She set the glass back down without drinking from it. Patricia came by. Her face was smooth and professional. "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Carter?" "No, thank you." Patricia started to turn away. "Patricia." The flight attendant paused. Emily did not quite know what she was about to ask. The question had not formed yet, but she could feel it, there, somewhere behind her teeth, and she opened her mouth, and what came out surprised her. "Who is he?" Patricia looked at her. For a long moment, Patricia said nothing. Then, very quietly, with the flat professionalism of a woman who had been flying this route for 26 years, Patricia said, "He's a passenger, ma'am, like everyone else." And she walked away. Emily sat alone in seat 2B. The empty seat beside her hummed, faintly, with the vibration of the engines. She looked down at her phone. The email was still open. Q3 targets. Acquisition timeline. The cursor blinked at the end of an unfinished sentence. She could not, for some reason, remember what she had been about to type. She turned her head slowly and looked back over her shoulder. Past the curtain that separated business class from economy, she could see, very faintly, the top of a dark-haired head bent over something in his lap. He was talking to someone. She couldn't see who. An older woman, maybe. He was smiling. He was smiling as if none of the last hour had happened, as if he had chosen this seat, as if he had always meant to sit back there among the rows of strangers with their neck pillows and their crying babies and their plastic cups of ginger ale. He looked, she realized with a small cold slip somewhere behind her ribs, completely at ease, more at ease than she was. Emily Carter, who had made vice president at 28, who had closed a $40 million deal in a Tokyo hotel room on 4 hours of sleep, who had never once in her adult life doubted that she belonged exactly where she was. Emily Carter turned back around in her seat, folded her hands in her lap, and for the first time in a very long time, felt the specific, small, unfamiliar sensation of not knowing something important. She did not know who he was. She did not know what she had just done. And somewhere in the back of the plane, a man with a worn canvas bag and a faded heart drawn on the side was leaning forward to help an old woman put her tray table down. And he was laughing, softly, at something the old woman had said. And he was not, she understood, with a slow and terrible clarity. He was not the kind of man she had thought he was. He was something else. The plane flew on. Outside the window, at 35,000 feet, the clouds moved past in long white columns, indifferent to everyone in every seat, and Emily Carter closed her eyes and tried, without success, to remember the exact moment she had decided that a man in a worn jacket didn't belong in the chair beside her. She couldn't remember it. It was just there. The way weather was there, the way breathing was there, and that, more than anything else that had happened in the last hour, was the thing that made her afraid. The old woman in seat 24C had hands like folded paper. That was the first thing Ryan noticed when he sat down in the aisle seat across from her. The way her fingers shook, just slightly, as she tried to work the plastic latch on her tray table. Not the shake of fear. The shake of 80-something years of weather, and weddings, and funerals. The shake of a body that had outlasted most of the things it had loved. He slid his canvas bag under the seat in front of him and buckled his seatbelt, and did not, for a long moment, look back at the curtain that separated economy from the front of the plane. "Here," he said. "Let me." The old woman looked up. Her eyes were a very pale blue, the color of water that had been left in a glass too long. "Oh, no, dear. I can manage." "I know you can." He smiled. It was a small smile, the kind you gave to strangers on buses. "Humor me. My daughter says I'm supposed to be useful to somebody at least once a day, or I don't get dessert." The old woman laughed. It came out thin and a little startled, like she wasn't used to being laughed with. "How old is she?" 7. He reached across and unhooked the latch with one finger. The tray table swung down. "Going on 40. "Oh, I remember 7. My granddaughter was 7 once. She's 31 now, and she still acts like she's 7 when she wants a favor." The woman settled her hands on the tray, palms down, flat, like she was making sure it would stay there. "You have a way with that." "With tray tables?" "With strangers." He looked at her. She was looking back at him with a clear-eyed steadiness that surprised him. People assumed old women were sweet. Sometimes they were. This one, he suspected, had been sharp her whole life and was not going to start softening now for anyone's comfort. Practice, he said. She nodded, as if he'd confirmed something she already suspected. You were up front. He went still, not much, just half a beat. But she caught it. I wasn't listening, she said. Well, I was, but not on purpose. You were 3 rows away, and voices carry. I want you to know I think that woman should be ashamed of herself, and I'm too old to pretend I don't. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. It's all right. It isn't. No, he admitted. It isn't, but getting worked up about it won't make me any younger either. She smiled for real that time. Her teeth were her own. That surprised him too. I'm Ruth, she said. Ryan. She tested it like a flavor. Good name. My late husband was a Ryan. Ryan Emmett Holcomb. 41 years together, and I still called him Holcomb when I was mad at him, which was often. What'd he do to deserve it? Mostly breathed wrong. She patted her own knee as if she was comforting herself. I miss him every single morning. It's a nuisance. I'd recommend against it. He laughed. A real one, quieter than he'd laughed in a while. And she looked pleased with herself, the way a cat looks pleased when it has successfully knocked something off a shelf. Up in the galley, Patricia was watching them. He could feel it without turning his head. He had been aware of her for the last several minutes. The pause in her steps when she'd come down the aisle with the drink cart, the slight adjustment of her trajectory, the way her eyes had moved past him, and then subtly come back. He recognized the look. It was the look of a woman who had done something she had not agreed with and was trying to figure out how to live with it. He didn't envy her. He hadn't meant to make it easier on her when he stood up in the front cabin. He hadn't been thinking about her at all. He had been thinking about Clara, about the fact that if he argued, he would still be arguing when the plane landed, and that the argument would leak into his voice when he called her tonight from the hotel, and that Clara would know. Clara always knew. She was 7, and she could already tell when he was angry 3 states away over a telephone line. Children had radar for that sort of thing. He did not want to be a man whose anger arrived home before he did. But Patricia didn't know that. Patricia thought he had done her a kindness, and he could see, in the way she was standing in the galley with her arms folded tight across her uniform jacket, that it was sitting badly with her. It should, he thought. Not cruelly, just honestly. It should sit badly with her. Tell me about your daughter, Ruth said. He looked over. You're doing that face, she said. The thinking about her face, I know it. I used to have it. Tell me. So he told her. He told her, in the low half voice people use at 35,000 feet, about Clara, about how she had been born 7 weeks early and had spent the first month of her life in a plastic box with wires coming out of her chest, about how her mother had left when Clara was 15 months old, not in a dramatic way, not in a cruel way, just in the slow, practical way of a woman who had realized she wasn't built for the life she'd signed up for and had decided, reasonably enough, to sign up for a different one. About how Clara had cried for her for a week, and then, with the particular merciless adaptability of very small children, had stopped and had never really asked about her again, which was somehow worse than the crying. He told her about how he had worked 3 jobs for 4 years, about the apartment over the dry cleaners where Clara had learned to walk on a carpet that smelled permanently of chemical steam, about the first pitch deck he'd ever made, which he had typed on a library computer at night because he couldn't afford his own, printing it out on the free sheets the librarian slipped him when nobody was looking. He did not tell Ruth the name of his company. He did not tell her about the number on the check he had, in his jacket pocket right now, flown out this morning to collect. He told her only the shape of the thing, the shape of a man who had spent 10 years crawling out of a hole with a little girl on his back, and who was, finally, starting to be able to stand up straight. Ruth listened. She did not interrupt. When he was done, she reached across the aisle and put one of her folded paper hands over his for exactly 3 seconds. Then she took it back. Ryan, she said, have you had breakfast? He blinked. What? Breakfast, the meal before lunch. I had a granola bar in the terminal. She made a small sound of disgust. Press that button, the one with the little person on it. I don't need us. Press it. He pressed it. Brandon came down the aisle 30 seconds later with the careful tread of a man who thought he might be about to be yelled at. Yes, ma'am, sir. What can I— This young man needs breakfast, Ruth said. A real one. None of your little pretzel packets. He's got a growing child and he hasn't eaten. Brandon's eyes flicked to Ryan. Ryan shook his head, a small, embarrassed motion. Don't make this a thing. But Brandon was already nodding. There was something in his face, a small willingness, almost an eagerness, that Ryan recognized. Brandon was a young man who had been made to do something he didn't like an hour ago, and he was looking for an exit ramp back toward being the kind of person he thought he was. Ryan let him have it. An omelet would be great, Ryan said. If you've got one. We have one, Brandon said. Up front. I'll bring it to you. You don't have to. I'll bring it to you. He was gone down the aisle before Ryan could answer. Ruth settled back into her seat with the small, satisfied air of a woman who had successfully organized something. She reached into the seat pocket in front of her and pulled out a paperback. A romance novel, the cover featuring a shirtless man standing in front of a horse, and opened it with the calm of a person who had no further intention of making conversation until she felt like making conversation again. Ryan sat back. He closed his eyes. He listened to the hum of the engines and the soft cough of a baby 3 rows back, and the tinny leak of someone else's headphones playing music he didn't recognize. The plane moved gently through the air. Somewhere up ahead, beyond the curtain, Emily Carter was sitting in her leather seat with her sparkling water and her blinking cursor, and the slow, late-arriving understanding that she had, a few minutes ago, been wrong about something in public. He didn't hate her for it. He had tried, over the course of the last decade, to stop hating people for being what they had been taught to be. It was exhausting work, hating people like that. It was like being angry at a dog for barking at the postman. You could do it. It didn't change the dog. But he didn't have to like her either. He let his head rest against the seat back and, for the first time since he'd boarded, allowed himself to feel how tired he was. Up in the front cabin, Emily Carter was trying to read. She had opened 3 different emails in the last 12 minutes and had not successfully finished any of them. The words sat on the screen like little dark shapes she couldn't get to stand up straight. She would read a sentence, reach the end, realize she had absorbed nothing, and start over. She closed her phone and laid it face down on her thigh. The empty seat beside her was— she hated this. She hated that she was noticing it, loud. It hummed with its own small vibration. Her blazer sleeve kept drifting into the space his elbow had occupied. Once, without meaning to, she reached for the armrest that had been his and found herself touching the faint residual warmth still in the leather. She pulled her hand back like she'd been burned. Miss Carter. Patricia was beside her, holding a linen napkin folded around something warm. You've ordered the omelet, yes? Yes. Here you are. Patricia set the tray down. Her face was perfectly composed. Her voice was perfectly even. But something about her— the set of her shoulders, the angle of her chin— had changed since the first pass through the cabin. There was a stiffness there now, a formality. Patricia was giving her the full, correct, flawless version of her job and nothing else. Emily recognized it. She had been on the receiving end of it before. From assistants she had pushed too hard. From junior associates she had made cry in a conference room. It was the particular politeness of a person who is choosing, in the absence of any other available option, to be exactly as kind as professionalism required them to be. No more. Thank you, Patricia. Ma'am. Patricia started to move on. Patricia, the flight attendant stopped. Her head turned, just slightly. Not unfriendly. Not friendly. Just waiting. Emily opened her mouth. Nothing came. The question she had wanted to ask was still there, unformed, behind her teeth. She could feel the shape of it. She could not make it come out. Was there something else, ma'am? No? Her voice sounded strange to her. No, sorry, thank you. Patricia inclined her head a half-inch and moved down the aisle. Emily looked at the omelet. It was on a white porcelain plate. It was garnished with a small sprig of something green and something that was either chive or a very thin scallion. It was the kind of omelet you ordered on a business flight when you wanted to believe that you were the kind of person who ate omelets on business flights. She had no appetite. She picked up her fork anyway. Put it down. Picked it up again. She was thinking, And this was the thing that was making her crazy. She was thinking about his laces, his blue sneaker laces. She had noticed them when he'd stood up to leave. Bright blue, brand new. Too bright, in a way, for the faded jacket and the canvas bag. The kind of thing a man did not buy for himself. The kind of thing someone had bought for him. A wife, maybe. Or, she stopped. A child. A child had bought those laces. She did not know how she knew that. She just knew. She set the fork down. She pulled out her phone. She did something she had not done in a very long time. Something she had, in fact, spent the last 7 years training herself out of doing. She opened her browser and typed a stranger's name into the search bar. Ryan Cole. It was a common name. She knew that. She got, as expected, a mess of results. A realtor in Florida, a high school football coach in Ohio, an obituary for a veteran in Arkansas. She scrolled. She narrowed it. Ryan Cole Tech. More hits, but still noise. Ryan Cole Investor. The fourth result was a photograph. She stopped scrolling. She stared at her screen. The photograph was 3 years old, from some kind of industry conference. The man in it was standing at the back of a panel discussion, slightly out of focus, half his face obscured by someone else's shoulder. His jacket was different. His hair was a little longer. But it was him. She knew the set of his jaw. She knew the line of his brow. She even knew somehow, before she confirmed it in the caption, that the photograph had been taken by accident, that he had not posed, that he had not wanted to be there, that the photographer had been trying to get someone else. The caption read, Ryan Cole, back, left, founder of a stealth stage venture group, declined to participate in the panel. She read it 3 times. She put the phone face down on the tray. She picked up her fork. She put it down again. Her hand was not steady. She was, for the first time in several years, unable to pretend it was. She thought, with a flat, sick clarity, he knew. He knew what I was doing. He knew the whole time. That was what had been in his face when he had walked past her. She understood it now. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't even anger. It was the small, still, patient attention of a man who had seen 1,000 versions of her before, and who had already decided how he was going to spend the next 4 hours of his life, and who had not once, given her the satisfaction of making it about him. She had been so sure of her instincts. She had been so sure. Ma'am, can I refresh your water? Brandon was there, holding a pitcher. His face was neutral. His face was, in fact, a little too neutral, a little too carefully neutral. No, she said. Her voice was thin. No, I'm fine, thank you. Brandon nodded, started to turn. Wait. He paused. Brandon? She looked at him, actually looked at him, not at the uniform, not at the pitcher, not at the name tag that was standard issue company-wide. At him, at the young man in his mid-20s who had walked into his job this morning expecting a normal shift. How long have you been flying? He blinked. Ma'am? With the airline, how long? 2.5 years. Do the crew talk about certain passengers after flights? His face did not move exactly, but something behind it did. A small, careful door swung shut. We don't discuss passengers, ma'am. No, I know, She exhaled. I'm asking the wrong question. I'm sorry. Forget I asked. Ma'am. He moved down the aisle. She watched the back of his uniform until the curtain swallowed him, and then she turned her face to the window and pressed her forehead, lightly, against the cold plastic of the shade. Outside, the clouds were still indifferent. In the back of the plane, the omelet had arrived. It was, Ryan noted, the same omelet that was being served up front. They hadn't given him the chicken wrap from the economy menu. Someone had made a decision. Brandon, probably. Or Patricia. He ate it slowly, the way you ate when you hadn't realized you were hungry, until food had arrived in front of you. Ruth watched him out of the corner of her eye, pretending to read, and when he was about halfway through, she nodded to herself and went back to her paperback with the air of a woman whose day was now proceeding correctly. You're a good patient, she said, without looking up. I had a good nurse. He finished the omelet. He wiped his mouth with the paper napkin. He folded the napkin and put it on the plate. He pushed the tray table up and latched it carefully, because latches had been betraying him all morning, and he did not trust this one either. He leaned his head back. He thought about calling Clara. He couldn't, of course, not from up here. There was a little icon on the armrest that claimed he could buy Wi-Fi for $12, but the Wi-Fi on these planes had, in his experience, the approximate reliability of a fortune cookie. He would have to wait until he landed. He calculated in his head. 3 hours left. 2-hour drive to the meeting. Meeting, 90 minutes if it went well, 4 hours if it didn't. Then the hotel. Then he could call her. It would be almost her bedtime by then. She would answer the phone in her pajamas, the ones with the foxes on them. She would say, in the particular solemn voice she used for important announcements, "Daddy, I lost another tooth." Or, "Daddy, Grandma let me have 2 popsicles." Or, "Daddy, when are you coming home?" He would say, "Soon, baby, soon." He said that a lot. He was tired of saying it. That, more than the omelet, was what had brought him on this plane this morning. Not the acquisition, not the money. The fact that if he could get this one deal right, if he could get the partners in Chicago to agree to his terms, he could restructure his next 18 months in a way that let him sleep in his own house 5 nights out of 7 instead of 2. He had been trying, in small private increments for 3 years, to build himself a life that stopped requiring him to leave his daughter every other Tuesday. It was going to take one more hard push, just one more. He let his eyes drift closed. He was almost asleep when he heard it. The curtain at the front of the cabin, sliding aside. Footsteps in the aisle. Heels soft on the thin carpet. He did not open his eyes. He knew who it was the same way Ruth had known he had a daughter. Bodies had signatures. Sound had tells. The rhythm of a walk was a kind of handwriting. He kept his eyes closed. The footsteps reached row 24. They stopped. Silence. A long one. He could feel her standing there in the aisle. He could feel the specific weight of her presence, the careful, ungainly, almost embarrassed weight of a person who had come down the full length of the plane without deciding what they were going to do when they got to the end of it. He considered, briefly, pretending to be asleep. He didn't. He was tired of pretending about things that didn't matter. He opened his eyes. Emily Carter was standing in the aisle beside his seat. She was holding, for reasons he did not immediately understand, a small bottle of sparkling water. Unopened. The condensation was beating on her fingertips. Her face was different. He registered that first. The composure was gone. Not broken. Set aside, maybe. Folded up and put on a shelf somewhere. What was left was a woman in her early 30s with slightly flushed cheekbones and eyes that weren't quite meeting his, which was, he suspected, the closest thing to honesty she'd shown all morning. "Hi," she said. Came out rougher than she meant it to. She cleared her throat, a short, annoyed sound, as if her own voice had betrayed her. "Hi," he said. Ruth, beside him, did not look up from her paperback. But he could see, and he almost smiled, that her eyes had stopped moving across the page. Emily shifted her weight. "I'm sorry. I'm interrupting. I wanted to..." Stopped. She looked at the bottle of sparkling water in her hand like she had only just noticed it was there. "I don't know why I brought this," she said. The honesty of it surprised him. Enough that he felt, for the first time all morning, the faintest flicker of something that wasn't detachment. Not warmth, not yet. Something in the neighborhood of "at least she knows." "It's okay," he said. "Did you need something?" She drew a breath. "Could I sit down?" He looked at her. He did not answer immediately. It was not cruelty. He was genuinely considering it. There was a part of him, not the part that was going home to his daughter, the other part, the 10 years ago part that still lived somewhere behind his ribs and occasionally knocked on the inside of his chest to remind him it was there. That part wanted very much to say no. "Go back to your seat, Ms. Carter. Go back to your sparkling water and your email and your cabin." But the rest of him was tired, and there was an empty middle seat in his row. The window seat was occupied by a kid with headphones who had been asleep since boarding. "It's a middle seat," he said. "I don't care. It's a middle seat in economy." "I don't care." He was quiet a moment longer. "Suit yourself." She exhaled very slowly, as if she had been holding that breath since somewhere around row 7. She stepped past him. The kid with the headphones did not stir. She lowered herself into the middle seat, awkwardly, because blazers did not make it easy to slide into airplane middle seats, and also because she was wearing a pencil skirt, and the whole maneuver took 3 seconds longer than she wanted it to. And when she finally landed, she did not look graceful. She looked, for the first time since he had met her, like a human being who had made herself briefly physically uncomfortable on purpose, which was not a thing Emily Carter did. She set the unopened sparkling water on the tray in front of her. She stared at it. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "Okay. I don't have a speech prepared. I want to say that up front, because I think if I had a speech prepared, I would say it, and you would hate me, and I deserve that, but I'd like to at least not be more of what you already think I am." He looked at her. The side of her face was very close to him now, closer than it had been in the front cabin. He could see he hadn't seen this before, a small scar at the corner of her mouth, a thin white line, maybe half an inch long. Childhood, probably. A bike, a curb, something ordinary. "What do I think you are?" he said. Her jaw tightened. "I can guess." "Go on then." She glanced at him. For a second he thought she might refuse. Then she said, very quietly, "You think I'm someone who's never had to be wrong in public before?" He held her eyes. "Close," he said. "What would you say?" "I'd say you're someone who's never been forced to be wrong in public before. There's a difference." She absorbed that. It was not a comfortable thing to absorb. He watched her do it, watched the small, reflexive wince at the corner of her mouth, the scar side, and watched her, after a moment, accept it without argument. Ruth turned a page in her paperback. She did it very deliberately. He understood, without looking over, that Ruth was listening to every word and was choosing to communicate, through the sound of her page turn, that Ryan was handling this correctly and should continue. He almost smiled. Instead, he said, "Why are you down here, Miss Carter?" "Emily?" "Why are you down here, Emily?" She didn't answer right away. Her hands were in her lap. Her knuckles were a little white. He noticed that too. "I Googled you," she said. "Okay. That's not an apology." I know that's not an apology. I'm not bringing that up because now I know who you are, so I'm sorry. That's not the reason. That would be worse." "It would," he agreed. "I know." "So why are you down here?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Because I can't read my email." He waited. "I've read the same sentence 9 times, she said. I'm sitting up there and I keep trying to work, and I keep seeing your laces. I don't know why. Your shoes have blue laces, and I keep seeing them. And I keep thinking about the fact that you didn't buy those for yourself. And I can't read my email." She laughed. It was a small, surprised, slightly broken laugh. The laugh of a woman who had not expected to say any of what she had just said, and was now sitting inside the aftermath of it, a little stunned. He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. Then he looked down at his own sneakers. "My daughter," he said. "Clara. She's 7. She picked them out at the outlet mall. She said the blue looked brave." Emily made a small sound. He couldn't tell what kind of sound. "I don't know what brave laces are supposed to look like," he said, but she was very firm about it. "No," Emily said. Her voice was thick. "No, I get it. The blue, I get it." They sat in silence. The engines hummed. A toddler somewhere up the aisle said "mama" 3 times, with 3 different inflections, as if testing the word for weight. Ruth turned another page. Ryan could smell, very faintly, some kind of perfume on the woman beside him. Something expensive. Something that had probably cost more than he used to spend on rent in a month, a decade ago. It did not make him angry. It did not make him anything. It was just information. "I'm not going to apologize to you," Emily said. He turned his head. I am. I will. I am deeply sorry. For what I said, for what I did, for how I said it, for all of it. I was wrong. About everything." He didn't say anything. "But I'm not going to do it here," she said. "Sitting in a middle seat next to you after I made you walk back here in front of 60 people. Because that would be me making myself feel better. That wouldn't be for you. That would be for me." He watched her. "I thought about it the whole way back here," she said. And I realized if I do the thing where I apologize and cry a little and you forgive me and we both feel better, then the whole thing just gets erased. And I don't think I get to erase it. I don't think I've earned that. No, he said quietly. You haven't. She nodded, once, hard, like she'd been waiting for him to confirm it. So I came back here to say, I'm going to do it properly. When we land, in front of the captain, in front of the crew, not to humiliate myself, just to put it back on the record, correctly this time. Okay? But I wanted to tell you first because you're the one it was done to, and you deserve to hear it from me before anyone else. He looked at her. Something in his chest moved. Not a lot. A small sliding, the way a heavy thing shifts on a shelf during a mild earthquake. Emily? He said. Yes. You don't have to do the landing thing. I'm going to. I know. I'm telling you, you don't have to. Her eyes came up. They were wet. They were not spilling. There was a kind of ferocity in the way she was holding them in place that he found, almost against his will, a little admirable. People show you who they are, he said, when it's easy to choose comfort over fairness. She went very still. It's easy for you right now to go back to your seat and keep reading your email. Nobody's making you do this. The flight is almost over. You could get off this plane and never see me again, and your life would be the same. Yes. So the fact that you're sitting in a middle seat in economy next to a stranger you owe something to, that tells me who you are, not who you were up there, who you are right now at this second. She didn't answer. She was crying, a little now, quietly. The way women cried when they had spent most of their adult life training themselves not to cry in professional settings. It was an ugly, controlled, unpracticed thing, and he recognized it, and he did not look away. Ruth, across the aisle, turned another page of her paperback. She did not look up. She did not need to. I'm not forgiving you, he said. I want to be clear about that. That's not what this is. I know. I just wanted to make sure you knew. I know. Okay. Okay. She wiped her face, once with the back of her wrist. It smeared her eye makeup. She didn't seem to care. She looked down at her hands in her lap. Your daughter, she said. Clara. Yeah. Is somebody waiting for you at home? My mother. She stays with her when I'm gone. How often are you gone? He looked at the seat back in front of him. Too often. Emily nodded. She did not say anything else about it. After a moment, she reached for the unopened sparkling water on the tray. She cracked the seal. She took a small, careful sip, the way a person drinks when their throat is not quite working correctly. She set the bottle back down. I'm going to go back to my seat, she said. Okay. Not because I don't... She stopped, started again. Because if I stay down here any longer, it starts to be about me again. And I'm trying really hard right now not to make it about me. That's fair. Okay. She stood up, smoothed her blazer. She looked, for a moment, like she was about to say something else. She didn't. She stepped past him. Her leg brushed his knee. She didn't apologize for it, which he noticed, and which, though he would not have used this word, he respected. She walked back up the aisle. She did not look back. He watched her go until the curtain at the front of the cabin swallowed her, and then he sat for a long time with his hands folded in his lap, listening to the engines. Well, Ruth said finally. She had closed her paperback. She was looking at him over the top of her reading glasses. That was not the conversation I expected to eavesdrop on today. Sorry. Don't be sorry, it was more interesting than the book. The book is garbage. He's supposed to be a cowboy, but he owns 3 restaurants. It's ridiculous. He laughed. The laugh came out before he could stop it, and it surprised him. Ruth patted his hand again, the same 3-second pat as before. She'll do the thing, she said, when you land. You think so? Oh, yes. Ruth nodded slowly. She'll do it. Not for you, for herself, which is why it'll actually work. He considered that. Ruth, he said. Yes, dear. Were you a therapist? Heavens, no. I was an elementary school principal for 31 years. Same thing, really. Shorter clients. He laughed again, softer. He leaned his head back against the seat, out the window, the one he couldn't see from the aisle. but that he knew was there beyond the sleeping kid with the headphones. The clouds were changing. He couldn't see them. He could feel it. The plane had begun, somewhere in the last 10 minutes, its long, slow lean toward the ground. They were starting to come down. He thought about Clara. He thought about the foxes on her pajamas. He thought about a woman in a cream blazer who had walked back through a curtain with smeared makeup and a bottle of sparkling water she hadn't known why she was carrying. He thought, maybe it's not the same world I woke up in this morning. Then he thought, don't be dramatic. Then he thought, maybe it is, a little bit. The engines hummed on. Outside, somewhere beyond the aluminum skin of the plane and the indifferent columns of cloud, a city was coming up to meet them, full of people who were going to, each in their own small way, have an entirely ordinary afternoon. He closed his eyes. He let himself, for a few minutes, stop thinking. Ruth went back to her paperback. The plane began, slowly, to descend. The descent took the usual 40 minutes it always took, and Ryan Cole was awake for all of it. He didn't sleep on planes. He never had. There was a version of him somewhere. Maybe in a parallel universe, maybe in a future he hadn't lived into yet, who could fold himself into a business class seat and drop into unconsciousness the way other successful men seemed to. He was not that version. He had flown a lot of miles in the last 6 years and had slept through exactly none of them. He watched. Instead, the slow tilt of the wing outside the small square window the headphone teenager was no longer using. The kid had woken up somewhere during Emily's walk back through the curtain, had looked at Ryan with the dazed, unfocused eyes of the recently unconscious, had registered that a stranger was sitting next to him, had decided it wasn't worth engaging with, and had put his headphones back on. He was now watching something on his phone that involved a lot of explosions. Ryan could hear the tinny edge of the sound effects through the headphones. It was comforting, in a way. The ordinariness of it. Across the aisle, Ruth had set her paperback down on her lap, spine open, pages splayed. She was looking out the window, too. Her reflection floated there in the little oval of plastic, pale and thin, and she was smiling at it, the small private smile of a woman who had seen a lot of descents. "You get nervous?" she asked, without turning. "On landings?" No. "Good. I always did. 40 years of flying, and I still grip the armrest when the wheels come down. Holcomb used to laugh at me." "My daughter grips my hand," he said. "Every time. She squeezes it hard enough to leave a mark. And you pretend you don't notice." "I pretend I don't notice." Ruth smiled wider. "That's the job." The seatbelt sign pinged. A voice crackled overhead. Not the captain's, but some junior officers reciting the descent announcement with the bored efficiency of a man who had done it 900 times. Local time, temperature, gate, ground speed. Ryan tuned out halfway through. He was thinking about what Emily Carter was going to do, or try to do, when they landed. He thought, she'll try. He thought she might not finish. He thought, that's her problem, not mine. And then, more honestly, because he had promised himself years ago that he was going to be honest with himself about things like this, even when it cost him something. I want her to do it. Not because he wanted revenge. He didn't. Revenge was for men with more energy than he had. He wanted her to do it because he wanted, in his own tired and not entirely charitable way, to see if she could. He had made a business out of watching people. Investors thought investing was about numbers. It was about numbers, yes. But the numbers were the easy part. The hard part was watching a founder across a conference room table and knowing in the first 7 minutes whether they were the kind of person who would, 18 months from now, walk away from the hard thing when it got hard, or stand in it. He had gotten good at it. He had built a small fortune on the strength of that specific kind of seeing. He was watching Emily Carter now, in the same way, without being in the same room with her. He was watching her in his head. He was trying to decide whether she was going to stand in it. Across the aisle, Ruth said, "She's terrified, you know." He turned. "Up there. Right now, she's terrified." Ruth did not take her eyes off the window. She sat back down in her seat, and she's done the calculation, and she's realized it's easier to just not do it. To just get off the plane and go to her meeting, and she's fighting herself about it right now, and I will tell you what, I've seen that fight 1,000 times. I ran a school, dear. I've watched 8-year-olds and 40-year-olds have that exact fight. The 8-year-olds usually win. The 40-year-olds usually don't. He looked at her. You don't know her. I don't have to. It's always the same fight. The plane tilted, the wing dipped. Out the window, the clouds were thinner now, torn into pale shreds, and below them the city was starting to come up. A grid of streets, a gleam of water, the small methodical industry of a place where people lived. You're rooting for her, he said. I am. Why? Ruth turned her head finally and looked at him. Because she came back. She said it simply, flat, like it was the only sentence that needed to exist about it. A lot of people in her situation wouldn't have come back, she said. Not all the way down the aisle, not in front of everyone, not to a stranger. Most people spend the whole flight telling themselves a story about how they were actually fine, and maybe they overreacted a little, but actually the man was being weird. Actually, there was something about him. Actually. Most people get off the plane and they never think about it again. She came back. That's not nothing. He thought about that. It's not enough, he said. No, it isn't. But it's the beginning of enough, and the beginning of enough is more than almost anyone manages. He looked at her for a long time. You're a lot, he said finally. I know. She picked her paperback up off her lap. She closed it. She put it in her purse. She folded her reading glasses and clipped them to the front of her blouse. I'm going to sleep for the last 15 minutes of this, she said. I suggest you try to, too. Your daughter's going to want you sharp. Clara's going to want me home. Same thing. She closed her eyes. He did not close his. He watched the window and the city rising and thought very carefully and very deliberately about his daughter, about the small specific weight of her hand in his, about the 2 stuffed animals she always brought to bed, about the way she whispered Daddy in the middle of the night sometimes when she'd had a bad dream and wasn't sure if she should wake him up. He thought about her because he needed, in that moment, to be reminded what he had flown out this morning for. The woman 2 cabins forward was going to do what she was going to do. He was going to go home to his daughter. One of those 2 things was more important than the other. 2 rows back of the front galley, Emily Carter was failing to breathe correctly. She had sat back down in her seat with the calm, practiced carriage of a woman who had just come back from a walk and did not want anyone to notice she had been anywhere unusual. She had pulled out her compact. She had fixed her eye makeup, which was a lost cause but which she had fixed anyway. She had crossed her legs. She had opened her phone. Then, very quietly, she had stopped breathing correctly. It was not a panic attack. She would not have called it that. Emily Carter did not have panic attacks. She had, in the 12 years since she had taken her first job out of graduate school, trained her nervous system with the efficiency of a gymnastics coach, and her nervous system did not, generally, give her this kind of trouble anymore. Her nervous system was giving her this kind of trouble. Her breaths kept coming in the wrong place. Too high, too shallow, too fast. She would catch herself and try to pull one deep into her belly, and then her body would refuse, and the next one would be shallower than the one before it. Her hands, which she had always been proud of, steady hands, negotiating hands, hands that had never once trembled across a boardroom table. Her hands were doing a thing on her phone screen that she did not like. She set the phone down. She put her hands flat on her thighs. She closed her eyes. She counted. She did a thing she had been taught at a weekend executive retreat 4 years ago, something involving nostrils and counting, something she had mocked at the time. She did it now. It helped a little. Not much. The worst part was not the fear. The worst part was the surprise of the fear. She had told the man whose name was Ryan Cole, whose daughter was named Clara, she had discovered 10 minutes of Googling ago, a sufficiently serious person that he had been quietly referenced in 2 industry newsletters she subscribed to but had never personally encountered. She had told him, in her own voice, with her own words, that she was going to do something when they landed. And now she was not sure she was going to. That was the part that was breaking her. She had said a thing out loud. To another human being, to his face. And now, 23 minutes later, she was sitting in a business class seat with a blanket on her lap, trying to talk herself out of it. She thought, he would understand. She thought, no one has to know. He wouldn't say anything. She thought, I could send an email to the airline. I could write a letter. That's more permanent, actually. That's more meaningful. A formal letter would do more good than some awkward thing in front of the jetway. She thought, I could tip Patricia, very generously, on the way out. She thought, or I could not do any of this, and instead I could send flowers to the crew next week. A gift basket. A really nice one. From a company I know in Napa that does the preserves. She thought, and this was the one that made her open her eyes, because she heard it in her head in her own voice and hated it. I don't even know if he'll still be at the gate. He's an economy. He'll get off after everyone. By the time he's off, the crew will be gone. There won't be anyone to apologize to. So really, it's logistical. She sat with that for a moment. Then she laughed. Once. Out loud. A short, hard, disgusted sound that she did not mean to make. The man across the aisle from her, a business-class stranger in an expensive gray suit, some kind of consultant, she had not looked at him closely, glanced up from his tablet. She ignored him. Logistical, she thought. She had called it logistical. She had talked herself in under 3 minutes from I am going to do this the right way to its logistical. This was, she understood with a slow, flat clarity, exactly the fight Ruth had been describing one cabin back, though of course she did not know that Ruth existed or that Ruth had called it. She only knew that the small, reasonable voice inside her head was extremely good at its job, had been good at its job for a very long time, and was currently doing its job against her. She looked out the window. The city was coming up. She thought about her father. She did not often think about her father in the middle of the day. She kept him in a carefully organized box in the back of her head, and she got him out on his birthday and the anniversary of his death, and occasionally on long flights when she was vulnerable to him. He had been a high school shop teacher in a town of 4,000 people in the middle of a state nobody visited on purpose. He had worn work boots to church. He had, in the last 6 months of his life, taught Emily how to change the oil in her car in the driveway because, he said, I don't want you being the kind of woman who can't do this. She had been 19. She had hated the driveway. She had hated the oil. She had loved him to the point of aching. He had told her once, when she had come home from college angry about a professor who had condescended to her, honey, don't spend your life being mad at people who look down on you. Spend your life being the kind of person who doesn't look down. She had taken the first half of that advice. She had not done very well on the second half. She closed her eyes again. She said very quietly, in her own head, in a voice she almost recognized, "You are going to do the thing." She said, "You don't get to not do it just because it's uncomfortable." She said, "If you don't do it, you become the person who didn't do it, and that person is going to live inside you forever." She opened her eyes. Her hands, on her thighs, had stopped doing the thing. She picked up her phone. She opened her notes app. She did something she had not done in a long time. She wrote out, in neat short phrases, the shape of what she was going to say. Not a script. She had tried a script earlier, on the way down the aisle, and had gotten to his row with nothing to say and had been humiliatingly holding a bottle of water. A script wasn't the answer. What she needed was an anchor. 3 words. 4. Something to come back to when her voice started shaking. She typed, "It was me. I was wrong. There is no excuse." She looked at the words. She put the phone face down on her leg. She breathed. What? Ryan felt the wheels come down before he heard them. The plane always gave you that, the small mechanical shudder, like a dog shaking off rain, followed by the low, deliberate grind of the landing gear extending into its home. He felt the tug of the flaps a second later. The plane slowed. The air outside the window thickened, visibly. The city was close now. Rooftops. Streets. A single white car on a frontage road, moving. Across the aisle, Ruth was asleep with her head tilted back and her mouth slightly open. She looked, in sleep, like a different person. Not the sharp, small woman who had organized his breakfast an hour ago, but someone younger and more fragile. Someone who still had a husband named Holcomb and did not yet have to miss him every morning. He looked away. It felt private somehow. He left her to it. The kid beside him was still watching explosions. The plane touched down. The shutter ran through the cabin. The brakes engaged, and for a few seconds gravity tried to push everyone forward, and Ryan, out of habit, put his hand flat against the seat back in front of him, even though he knew the seatbelt would hold him. The plane slowed. The plane rolled. The plane turned, with the slow, wide sweep of a large animal deciding where to go, and began the long taxi toward the gate. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The cabin erupted into the small, familiar noises it always made after landing. Seatbelts clicking open too early, phones coming on, someone up front making an annoyingly loud call about a connection. Ryan did not turn on his phone. He sat. He closed his eyes for a second, opened them, checked his watch, did the math again. 2-hour drive. 90-minute meeting. Hotel. Call. Call. He wanted very badly to hear his daughter's voice. Ruth, beside him, stirred and sat up and blinked and muttered, "Oh, here we are," and then reached across the aisle to pat his arm like they had known each other for decades instead of 3 hours. "Ryan?" "Yeah." "Thank you for talking to me." "Ruth, you talked to me. I was just seating arrangements." "Don't do that. Don't be falsely modest. It's unbecoming." He laughed. It came out tired. "Tell your daughter," she said, "that you met an old woman on a plane, and the old woman said she has brave shoes and an even braver father. Will you tell her that?" "I'll tell her." "Good." The plane reached the gate. The little chime went off. The seatbelt sign clicked dark. 70-odd people around them stood up more or less simultaneously and started doing the futile airplane standing thing, where everyone crowds into the aisle and then doesn't move for several minutes. Ruth did not stand. She had learned, she said, that the great joy of old age was that you were no longer expected to be in a hurry. She waited. Ryan waited with her. The kid with the headphones leapt up like a spring, punched his bag out of the overhead bin, and was gone down the aisle almost before the door at the front had opened. Ryan stood slowly. He reached up, lifted Ruth's small carry-on down for her, set it by her seat, then lifted his own canvas bag. The zipper was, for once, not making trouble. He slung the bag over his shoulder. Ruth stood up. She was shorter than he'd realized. The top of her head barely reached his collarbone. "Go ahead," she said. "You'll walk faster than me." "I'll walk with you." "No, you won't. You have a plane to catch up front, and I know it." "I don't know what that means." "Yes, you do." He looked at her. She looked back steadily. "Go," she said. "She's waiting for you to be somewhere for her to find you. Don't make her come looking. That's not how this works." He hesitated. "Go," Ruth said again, and gave his elbow the smallest push. He went. Ed. The aisle was still clotted with standing passengers. He moved through it slowly, not shoving, stepping aside twice to let someone else pass. When he got to the curtain separating economy from business class, he stopped. Patricia was there. She was standing in the little galley to the left, her hands busy with the coffee pots. Pretending, he understood immediately, to be busy with the coffee pots. She had seen him coming. She looked up. Their eyes met across the small aluminum space. She did not smile. She did something better. She gave him a tiny, precise nod, the kind of nod one professional gives another. And then she stepped aside without being asked and let him through. He went through the curtain into the front cabin. The business class passengers were doing what business class passengers did, gathering their structured leather bags, shrugging into cashmere coats, talking quietly into headsets. The air up here smelled slightly different than it had in the back. He had forgotten, in 3 hours, how different. He moved up the aisle. Seat 2B was empty. He stopped. He looked at the seat. He looked at the empty space beside his former seat, which was also empty, obviously, because nobody else had been assigned it, because it was his seat and he had been moved out of it. The small linen headrest cover was still faintly creased in the shape of the back of his head. Very faintly. He had not been there long. Emily Carter was not in 2B. Emily Carter was standing at the front of the cabin, 10 feet away, just to the left of the open cockpit door, talking quietly to Captain Marshall. Ryan stopped where he was. He did not approach. He did not need to. Every other business class passenger was still collecting their things, still folding coats, still murmuring into phones, and the small circle of floor at the front of the plane, the place where the galley met the cockpit corridor, had become, through the particular geometry of the moment, its own small stage. Captain Marshall was facing her. Patricia had come up from the back galley and was standing a few feet away, not pretending to be busy with anything now, her hands folded in front of her. Brandon was beside her. There was a third flight attendant, a woman Ryan hadn't seen before. Maybe she had been up in the front the whole flight, standing a little behind them. Emily was speaking. He couldn't hear the words. Not the first few. He could hear the tone, though. Low, careful, very steady, the tone of a person who had decided something and was now following through on that decision, not because it felt good, but because she had told herself she would. Then he caught a sentence. And I don't think it's enough to leave this airplane and not say it out loud, because if I don't say it out loud, then it didn't happen. And it did happen. And I did it. Captain Marshall's face did not move. He was giving her, Ryan recognized, the same careful professional attention he had given Ryan 3 hours ago. A good face, a listening face. The face of a man who had been at the controls of commercial aircraft long enough to understand that people in uniform had a duty to let people out of uniform finish their sentences. Emily swallowed. "I want to apologize," she said, "to your crew, on the record. I put them in a position today where they had to choose between serving a passenger and correcting a customer, and they chose the easier one, and that's not their fault. That's mine. I was the one who created that situation." "Ms. Carter," the captain began, very gently. "Please, let me finish." He nodded. She drew a breath. Her eyes were wet. She did not wipe them. Ryan noticed from where he stood that she had made the specific choice not to wipe them, which was, he didn't have a word for what it was. He filed it. "I implied to your flight attendant," she said, within earshot of another passenger, that passenger might not belong in the cabin he had a ticket for. I did not say it that way. I phrased it as a concern about my own seat. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie. I said it because I didn't like the way the man next to me looked, and I wanted him moved, and I was willing to use your crew to do it." Patricia's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Ryan saw it. "You were professional," Emily said, turning her head slightly toward Patricia. "You were more professional than I deserved. I put you in an impossible position and you handled it as well as anyone could. I'm sorry." Patricia did not speak. She gave Emily, after a moment, the same small, precise nod she had given Ryan. Emily turned back to the captain. "You made a call I would not have wanted to make," she said. "And you made it in a way that protected the passenger from me, which I am aware of and grateful for, even though I didn't deserve the grace. I'm sorry I put you in that position." The captain's eyes dropped, briefly, to the carpet, then back up. "Ms. Carter, thank you. I'm not finished." "I know, go on." She took another breath. The passenger," she said. "Mr. Cole, I already apologized to him. Privately. I don't think a public apology is... I don't think he needs that. From me. I don't think he owes me the ceremony of absolving me in front of everybody. So I'm not going to do that part of this in front of him. I already said what I needed to say to him where he was." Her voice caught for the first time. She covered it fast. "But I wanted to do this part in front of all of you," she said, "because you're the ones I used, and I wanted you to hear me say it, out loud, where there are witnesses, so that if I try to tell myself later that it wasn't that bad, or that I overreacted in correcting it, I can't, because I said it in front of 4 people. She stopped. She looked at the captain, at Patricia, at Brandon, at the 3rd flight attendant, whose name Ryan didn't know. That's what I wanted to say." For a long second, nobody spoke. Then Patricia, who had been carrying her stiffness like a piece of uniform all morning, uncrossed her hands and took a single step forward. "Miss Carter," Patricia said. Her voice was quiet. "Thank you. Please don't thank me. I'm not thanking you to be polite. I know, I still don't want to be thanked. I didn't earn it." Patricia looked at her for a moment. Then, with the smallest softening at the corners of her mouth, she said, "You earned a piece of it, not all of it. You earned a piece." Emily exhaled. Her shoulders dropped, for the first time that morning, about half an inch. "I can accept that." "Good." The captain cleared his throat. He looked for a moment like he was about to say something official. Then he didn't. Instead, he said simply, "Safe travels, Ms. Carter." "Thank you, Captain." She turned. She saw Ryan. She had not seen him until that second. He was standing 10 feet behind her, in the aisle between rows 2 and 3, with his canvas bag on his shoulder and his hands loose at his sides. He had not moved. He had not made a sound. He had let her finish the thing before she knew he had heard it, because he had understood, when he first came through the curtain and saw her standing there, that she was not doing this for his benefit, And the worst thing he could do was give her a chance to make it about him. Her face moved, once, quickly. Something went through it that he couldn't name and that he suspected she didn't want named. She did not say anything to him. He did not say anything to her. He gave her at last a small nod, not a grand one, not a forgiving one, a small, flat, practical nod. The kind of nod one working person gives another when they have watched, from across a room, a hard thing being done correctly. Her chin came up a fraction. Her eyes, he noted, were still wet and she still had not wiped them. She nodded back. He walked past her. He walked past the captain, who inclined his head again, the way he had in the aisle hours ago, and Ryan returned the inclination exactly, out of some instinct he didn't analyze. He walked past Patricia, who said quietly, "Mr. Cole, I'm glad you're home." "I'm not home yet," he said, "but thank you." He walked past Brandon, who did not speak, but whose face had the particular soft, complicated gratitude of a young man who has watched someone he served do the right thing in front of him. He walked off the plane. The jet bridge smelled the way jet bridges always smelled. The carpet was gray. The carpet had always been gray. He moved through it slowly, with the loose, relieved gait of a man who had just been released from 3 hours of sitting very still. His knees did not like 3 hours of sitting very still anymore. He was 32. He had noticed, in the last year or so, that his body had begun to file small complaints about things it had never complained about before, and he found this both annoying and humorous. He thought, as he walked, "That's over." He thought, "That was something." He thought, "I don't have to know what it was yet." The jet bridge opened into the terminal. Midday light, airport noise, the rolling clatter of suitcases, the distant canned voice of a gate agent announcing a final boarding call, the smell of coffee that had been sitting in a carafe too long. He checked his watch. He had 15 minutes before his ride was supposed to meet him at passenger pickup. He reached into his pocket for his phone, turned it on, watched it wake up, and scrambled to catch up with the world. Notifications started to roll in. Emails, a missed call from his mother, a voicemail, 3 texts. He thumbed through them with the quick, efficient inattention of a man who had done this after every single flight he had ever taken. The voicemail was from his mother. He put the phone to his ear. "Hey, honey, it's Mom. Claire's fine, nothing to worry about. I just wanted to let you know. She had a little bit of a meltdown this morning after you left. Nothing big. You know how she is. She's okay now. She wants me to tell you she lost her second tooth on the bottom, and she wants to show you on the phone tonight. She told me 3 times not to tell you, so it's a surprise, so I am obviously telling you. You can act surprised. All right, fly safe. Love you." He stood for a second in the middle of the terminal with the phone pressed to his ear, even after the voicemail had ended. People flowed around him. A man with a briefcase. A woman with twin toddlers. A cluster of college students in matching sweatshirts. He did not move. "She had a little bit of a meltdown this morning after you left." He closed his eyes. He pressed the heel of his free hand briefly against his forehead. "Nothing big. You know how she is." He did know. He knew the exact shape of Clara's meltdowns, the way a sailor knows the shape of a particular wave. He knew that they came usually, not when he left. She was stoic when he left. She put on a brave face and waved at him from the porch. But 40 minutes later, when the novelty of being in her grandmother's care had worn off and the smallness of his absence had begun to fill the whole house, he knew that his mother would have handled it exactly right. He knew that Clara would, by now, have forgotten she had done it. He knew, too, that he hadn't forgotten. He did not allow himself to stand there for long. He had, over the years, developed a specific callous over the part of him that wanted, in moments like this, to sit down on the floor of an airport terminal and not get back up. He pressed on the callus. He opened his eyes. He put the phone in his jacket pocket. He started walking toward the exit. He had taken maybe 20 steps when he realized someone was walking beside him. He turned his head. Emily Carter was matching his pace. She had a single carry-on, the same sleek leather bag from the overhead bin, rolling behind her. Her blazer had been folded over her arm. Her hair was a little less neat than it had been 3 hours ago. She was walking with her eyes straight ahead, the way a person walks when they have decided to approach somebody and have not decided what to say when they catch up. He slowed. "Emily." "I know," she said, quick, embarrassed. I know, I'm I'm not doing another thing. I'm not trying to do another thing. I'm going the same direction as you for about 50 more feet because my driver is meeting me at the same curb you're probably walking to, and I didn't want it to be weird. Like I was avoiding you after. So I'm just walking in the same direction as you. He almost laughed. Not at her. For her. There was something so specifically unpracticed about the way she had just said all of that, so different from the smooth, crisp woman who had flagged down a flight attendant in the front cabin 3 hours ago, that he felt for a moment almost protective of the version of her walking beside him now. It's fine, he said. Okay. It's fine, Emily. Okay. They walked. The terminal was bright. There was piped music playing somewhere, something generic, something Ryan could not have named even under threat. A child was running ahead of its parents. The child was laughing. The parents were laughing too. They looked tired and happy, and like they had been traveling too long, and like none of it mattered because the child was running. He thought, that's going to be me in 3 hours. He corrected himself, 5 hours. Meeting first. They reached the escalator down to baggage claim. Emily hesitated at the top of it. I go down here, she said, then left, then out. Me too. Okay. I know. Right. They stepped onto the escalator. She stood 1 step ahead of him. He watched the top of her head, the part in her dark hair, the place where she had, at some point in the last hour, let a single strand come loose. She did not seem to have noticed. Ryan. Yeah. She did not turn around. She kept her face pointed toward the bottom of the escalator. If I wanted to send something to your daughter, I don't know, a book or not a check, obviously not a check, but something for her. Would that be? No, he said quietly, not harshly. No, Emily. Okay. She doesn't know any of this happened. She doesn't need to. She has what she needs. Okay. And it wouldn't be for her. I know you know. I'm just saying it out loud. Okay. The escalator deposited them at the bottom. She stepped off. He stepped off behind her. I'm this way, she said, vaguely gesturing. Same. Right. They walked. They did not talk again until they had reached the sliding doors at the front of the airport and stepped out into the air, which was mild and smelled like a city that was trying to remember if it was spring yet. And she had seen her driver, a man in a black suit leaning against a black car, raising his hand. She stopped. She turned. For the first time since they had started walking, she looked him in the face. Thank you for letting me do that back there, she said. In front of the crew? For not coming up and making it easier on me, or harder, for just letting me do it. You did it yourself, Emily. I know, but you let me. He considered that. Yeah, he said quietly. Okay. Bye, Ryan. Bye, Emily. She turned. She walked toward the black car. The driver had already taken her carry-on. She climbed in. She did not look back through the window, which he noticed, and which was, he thought, the correct final choice. The door closed. The car pulled away. He stood on the curb with his canvas bag on his shoulder. He watched the car merge into the slow loop of airport traffic until it was gone. Then he turned and he looked up the curb to where his own ride was supposed to be. A silver sedan, the company had said, driver named Mike. And he saw the car and he saw Mike, and he raised his hand. He walked toward it. He had a meeting to get to. He had a child to come home to. He realized somewhere in the middle of all this, stopped feeling quite so tired. He walked on. The silver sedan pulled away from the curb with the specific, unhurried confidence of a driver who had been doing this particular route for a long time. Mike was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose jacket had never quite fit him, because no jacket fit men built the way he was built. He drove with both hands on the wheel and did not attempt conversation, which Ryan appreciated more than he could have articulated in that moment. Ryan leaned his head against the cold glass of the passenger window. The city slid past. Strip malls first, the kind that cluster around airports in every city in America. Chain pharmacies, chain breakfast places, a self-storage facility with a flag that was too big for its pole. Then the long gray stretch of highway where the city thinned out and the country tried, briefly, to reassert itself before the next exit canceled it out. Then the skyline, rising slowly in the middle distance, a silhouette of glass and steel that looked from this angle like every other skyline he had ever approached from the airport. He pulled out his phone. He did not call his mother. He wanted to. He made himself not. He had learned over the last 6 years that calling home between the airport and the meeting was a bad idea. It softened him in ways he could not afford to be softened before walking into a room of men who were paid to test whether he could stand up straight. He would call after. Instead, he opened the presentation. He had looked at the deck so many times in the last 8 months that the slides moved under his thumb almost without his input. He was not really reading. He was checking the shape. He was running his eyes over it the way a carpenter runs his hand along a board, feeling for the splinter. 43 slides. The ask on slide 31. The kill shot on slide 37. The one where the numbers told the story that all the other slides had been quietly setting up. He had built the deck so that by the time the people in the room reached slide 37, they should already know what it was going to say. If the deck worked, slide 37 wouldn't be a surprise. It would be a confirmation. He closed the file. He put the phone down. He looked out the window. He thought, I'm not thinking about the deck. He thought, I'm thinking about a woman in a cream blazer. He didn't want to be. He noticed the thinking with the same dispassionate irritation with which he might have noticed a low tire. It was inconvenient. It was not, at this particular hour, useful. Emily Carter had gotten into her black car and driven away, and whatever had happened back there on the plane was, by any reasonable standard, finished. He had given her a nod. She had given him one back. They had walked out of an airport together, in silence, like two people who had accidentally attended the same funeral and were not pretending to be friends about it. And yet he kept, involuntarily, going back to the small moment on the escalator when she had asked if she could send Clara something, and he had told her no. He had been right to say no. He knew that. Sending a stranger's daughter a gift was a way of paying off a debt that was not paid off by gifts, and Emily, to her credit, had understood that immediately. She had said okay. She had not argued. She had not tried to convince him. She had absorbed it and moved on, the way a person absorbs a correction when they already suspected, before they asked, that the correction was coming. That was the part he kept going back to. Not the question. The way she had taken the answer. It was a small thing. It was a very small thing. People took corrections badly all the time, and people occasionally took corrections well, and it did not, in the general scheme of human behavior, mean very much when a person took a correction well, except that it was unusual enough that he had, apparently, noticed. He noticed that he had noticed. He frowned at the window. Mike glanced at him in the rear-view mirror just once, and then went back to driving. A good driver. Ryan made a mental note to tip him well. The car hit the long bridge into the downtown loop. On either side, gray water, a barge, gulls. Beyond the bridge, the tower he was meeting in. 47 floors of glass. The building's name stamped across the top in discrete gold letters you could only see from certain angles. He had been in that lobby 4 times in the last 2 years. The security guards knew his face, but not his name. That was, he had learned, the best possible equilibrium to have with a building. Mike pulled into the underground drop-off. He got out. He opened Ryan's door. He did not reach for the bag because Ryan had told him, on a previous ride 3 months ago, not to. What time, Mr. Cole? Hour and a half. Maybe 2. I'll text you. I'll be here. Thanks, Mike. Ryan walked into the lobby. Marble, because of course. A water feature, because of course. A receptionist in a headset, because of course. He gave his name at the desk, took the elevator to the 42nd floor, walked down the corridor he had walked down 4 times before, and pushed open the glass door of the conference room where 3 men were already waiting for him. They stood up when he came in. That had been different the first time. 2 years ago, they had not stood up. 2 years ago, they had kept him waiting for 17 minutes and had offered him a water bottle that was not cold. A lot had happened in 2 years. Ryan. Tom. Handshakes around the table. The 2 men beside Tom were new. One a junior partner named Ellis, who Ryan had met once by phone. The other a woman in her 40s named Diane, whose name Ryan recognized from a memo he had read on the plane that morning, before the business class cabin had done what it had done. He sat down. He opened the laptop. He did what he had flown out here to do. Much. The meeting went well. He did not allow himself to think the words "it went well" while it was happening, because thinking them was the fastest way he knew to unmake it. He sat in the chair, he moved through the deck, he answered the questions that were real questions, and waited out the ones that were posturing. Tom pushed on the valuation. Ryan had expected him to. Ryan had built into the deck a specific slide that existed solely to survive the push on the valuation, and the slide did its job. Diane asked 3 questions about governance. Ellis asked 1 question about retention, which Ryan answered in 30 seconds, after which Ellis sat back and did not say much else. At the end, Tom looked at Diane. Diane looked at Tom. Something happened between them that Ryan had watched happen in 1,000 rooms and had trained himself never to try to read in real time. He kept his face calm. He kept his hands on the table. He waited. Tom stood up. Ryan, we're going to need to do 1 more round internally, end of the week, but speaking for myself, I think we're very close. Appreciate that, Tom. Don't book another meeting with anyone else on this, not until you hear from us. Understood. Handshakes again. He walked out of the conference room with the deliberately measured gait of a man who was aware that Tom's assistant could still see him through the glass walls. He waited until he was in the elevator and the doors had closed before he allowed himself to exhale 1 long, slow breath, and to let his forehead drop, briefly, against the cool steel of the elevator wall. They were going to do the deal. Probably. He would know for sure by Friday. He would not know for sure until he knew for sure. He had been in this position before, twice, and once it had turned into a deal, and once it had evaporated on a Thursday morning in a phone call that lasted 90 seconds. He would not know until he knew. But he stood in the elevator and he thought carefully about what Friday might look like. The call, the yes, the 18 months of restructuring that would follow, the way his calendar would start, slowly, to have more days on it where he did not have to be on a plane. And he let himself have the thought, for just the length of the elevator ride, of what it would feel like to make school pickup every Tuesday. Then the doors opened into the lobby, and he put the thought away. Mike was already pulling up when Ryan walked out into the drop-off. He climbed into the back seat. "Hotel, sir?" "Hotel." He took out his phone. He called his daughter. "Daddy?" "Hey, baby. Did you know I lost a tooth?" "You did?" "The bottom one, the one that was wiggly. I was eating an apple and it came out in the apple. I found it in the apple." "You're kidding." "I'm not kidding. Grandma said it was a very grown-up way to lose a tooth because I didn't even cry." "You didn't cry at all?" "I cried a little." "Grandma said I didn't. I did." "How little?" "Maybe medium." He laughed. The sound surprised him. He had not laughed, with his full chest, since before dawn. "Show me," he said. There was the fumbling sound of a 7-year-old trying to operate a video call with the efficiency of a 7-year-old. The camera swung wildly. For a moment he was looking at the ceiling of his mother's kitchen, the old ceiling fan going round, and then at the floor, the familiar linoleum, the corner where Clara's scooter lived, and then, finally, at Clara's face, tilted too close to the camera, her mouth open in a wide, exaggerated smile, her fingers pulling down her lower lip to show him the gap. It was the most beautiful thing he had seen all day. "Look at you," he said quietly. "I know." "Is there a new one coming in already?" "Grandma says it takes a while. She says I have to be patient, but I don't want to be. I want it to grow in right now so I can bite a carrot normally." "The adult ones come in bigger than the baby ones." "I know. It's going to look really weird. It's going to be like a big tooth in a little mouth." "Your mouth will grow too." "It better." He leaned his head against the window. The car was moving through midday traffic. The skyline was behind him now. He watched the city pass and listened to his daughter's voice through the little speaker of the phone. "Daddy?" "Yeah." "When are you coming home?" He closed his eyes. "Tomorrow afternoon, baby. Plane gets in at 4. I'll pick you up from Grandma's." "Will you come to dinner?" "Yes." "The whole dinner?" "The whole dinner. Even the part after dinner when I want to keep talking?" "Even that part." "Good." A pause. He could hear in the background his mother running water in the sink. She was, he suspected, doing dishes she didn't need to do because she knew she was being overheard, and she was giving them their space the way she always did, by busying her hands with something small. Daddy? Yeah. Was your plane okay? He opened his eyes. He looked at the back of Mike's head. He thought about the canvas bag beside him on the seat and the heart Clara had drawn on it 2 years ago when she was 5, which he kept meaning to have preserved somehow, and which he had never quite figured out how to preserve. My plane was okay, he said. Did you sit by the window? I did, for a little while. Then I moved. Why did you move? He paused. Sometimes you move, he said. It turned out okay. Oh. She accepted that the way Clara accepted a lot of things, with the perfect and curious faith of a child who had not yet learned to suspect her father of softening the world for her. Daddy? Yeah. I love you. I love you too, Clara. This much. He knew, even though he couldn't see her, that she had thrown her arms as wide as they would go. He knew that her fingertips were almost touching the walls of his mother's kitchen because she had been doing it the same way since she was 4, and her arms got longer every year. He opened his arms, in the back of the silver sedan, as wide as he could. He said, this much. The hotel was one of those business traveler hotels with a lobby that was trying very hard to look like a lobby where something interesting might happen. Dark wood, an expensive rug, a fireplace that was lit even though it was the wrong season for a lit fireplace. The front desk clerk was a young woman with a ponytail who did not look up from her screen when he approached. Checking in, Cole. ID, please. He handed it over. She tapped at the keyboard. Her eyes moved once between his license and her screen, and he recognized the small practice pause of a hotel clerk who was seeing a reservation level that did not match the man in front of her. It had happened before. It did not bother him. He let her process it. She looked up. Mr. Cole, you've been upgraded to a suite on the 34th floor, compliments of the property. Oh, thanks. Here's your key. The elevator is past the fireplace. Thanks. He took the key. He was halfway across the lobby before he stopped. The fireplace was on his right. The elevators were past it. But the lobby bar was on his left. A long dark wood bar with maybe 12 stools, half of them occupied, the lights over the bottles doing that low amber thing that hotel bars always did. And sitting on the third stool from the left, with her back to him, was a woman in a cream-colored blazer. He stopped. He actually stopped in the middle of a hotel lobby with his canvas bag on his shoulder. He thought, that can't be her. He thought, there are 20 million cream-colored blazers in the world. He took another step. The woman at the bar turned her head, not toward him, she didn't know he was there, but to say something to the bartender, and he saw, clearly in profile, the line of her jaw and the small white scar at the corner of her mouth, and the exact way her dark hair fell just below her chin, and he stopped again. It was her. He stood there for maybe 5 full seconds. He should, he knew, just walk to the elevator. It was a big city. The hotel had 400 rooms. They were both here for meetings in a downtown core that housed every major investment firm in the region. It was not impossible that they had ended up in the same hotel. It was, in fact, statistically reasonable. They did not have to acknowledge each other. He could take the elevator. She would never know he had been in the lobby. He took 2 steps toward the elevator, then he stopped again. He thought, with considerable annoyance at himself, don't. He thought, you've done the honest thing today. Don't now do the cowardly thing. He thought, it is in fact perfectly fine to say hello to a person you have already said goodbye to. He turned. He walked to the bar. He did not sit down right next to her. That would have been a move, and it was not a move. He took the stool 2 over, one empty stool between them, and he set his canvas bag on the floor between his feet, and he waited, without looking at her directly, for her to notice him. It took about 10 seconds. Her head turned, slowly, the way a person's head turns when they have registered, at the edge of their vision, something that their brain has not yet fully processed. She looked at him. Her eyebrows went up. Not dramatically. A small, polite, contained lift. You. Me. You're in this hotel. So are you. Are you following me? She said it dry. She said it with the edge of a very small, very tired smile at the corner of her mouth, the scar side corner. And he understood, with a small private relief, that they were going to be able to do this without it being difficult. He did not know why he had worried. He should have known. She had walked through a curtain and back down an aisle today. She was not going to be difficult about a hotel bar. I'm not following you. Disappointing. I can leave if you'd prefer. Please don't. The bartender, a man in his 30s with tattoos going up into his shirt sleeves, set a coaster in front of Ryan. What'll you have? He thought about it. Club soda. The bartender nodded. Emily, beside him, was drinking something amber in a short glass. She had not touched it in the last minute, he noticed. She was turning the glass slowly in a small half circle on the coaster. Her blazer was folded on the stool beside her. She was in a cream silk blouse. Her hair had come a little further loose than it had been on the escalator. How did it go? He said. She looked at him. My meeting? Fine. Long. They always run long when there's a lawyer in the room. There was a lawyer in the room. There was. Mine was fine too. Was it? She nodded. A silence sat down between them. It was not an unfriendly silence. It was the silence of two people who had already said the hard things earlier in the day and were now trying to figure out whether they had anything else to say, and were not in a hurry about it. The bartender brought his club soda. Ryan took a sip. Emily. Yes. We're not doing the thing from the plane again. I know. I just want to be clear about that. I know, I'm not doing it either. Okay. I'm sitting at a bar, having a drink. The hotel upgraded me and I didn't want to be alone in a suite yet. They upgraded me too. Did they? Apparently. Huh. Apparently I looked like I needed it. She laughed. It was the first real laugh he had heard from her and it surprised him. Not because it was beautiful. It was not particularly, but because it was unguarded. It was the laugh of a woman who had, for the first time in a long time maybe, stopped trying to control the room. I'm sorry, she said. That's not funny. It's a little funny. It's a little funny. She took a sip of her drink, finally. He watched her drink it. She set the glass back down. Ryan. Yeah. I'm not going to do this long. I just want to say one thing. Okay. What I said. On the escalator. About sending something for your daughter. I know you said no. I heard you. I'm not going back on it. Okay. I just wanted you to know that when you said no, I understood why. I didn't understand at the time. I think I thought you were being, I don't know, prideful. Or protective of her, which is the same as prideful in a way. But I sat in my car for a minute before it pulled away and I understood. You weren't protecting her from me. You were protecting me. From myself. From the version of me who would have sent something and then been able to tell herself she'd done something. He looked at her. She was not looking at him. She was looking at her glass. I don't know what to do with that, she said. That knowledge, about myself. I don't think there's anything to do with it tonight. I just wanted to say, out loud, to the one other human being on earth who would know what I was talking about, that I noticed. That's all. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, That's the second hard thing you've done today. Yeah. It gets easier with practice. Does it? I'm told it does. She smiled, small, crooked. Who told you? An elementary school principal I sat next to on a plane. Is she good? Oh, she's ferocious. You'd hate her. She'd love you. Emily laughed again. This one was quieter, almost to herself. They sat. They did not talk for a while. They drank and did not look at each other, and the bar noise went on around them. The low clink of glass, the murmur of businessmen one stool down talking about a golf handicap, the faint thump of music coming from a speaker somewhere that someone had set to the exactly wrong volume. A normal hotel bar. A normal evening. He looked at his watch. I should go up. Yeah. He put cash on the bar, more than the club soda was worth because he always did, and slid off the stool and reached down for his canvas bag. Ryan, he paused. I'm not going to ask for your number. Okay. I just want you to know I'm not asking for it, because I think if I asked, you might give it to me, and I'm not at a place where I get to ask yet. He looked at her. Yet. Maybe ever. I don't know. I'm saying I'm not going to ask right now. He He was quiet for a moment. Emily? Yes. That's the third hard thing today. I'm keeping count. Me too. He slung the canvas bag over his shoulder. He nodded to her. He turned. He walked past the fireplace, past the front desk, past the young woman with the ponytail who was, this time, watching him go, and he got into the elevator and he pressed 34. The doors closed. He stood alone in the elevator on the way up. He did not look at his reflection in the polished brass of the elevator wall. He did not need to. He could feel, somewhere behind his ribs, the same small sliding he had felt on the plane, the shift of a heavy thing, on a shelf, in a mild earthquake. He thought about Clara. He thought about the gap where her tooth had been. He thought about a silver sedan and a club soda and a woman at a bar who had, over the course of a single day, done 3 hard things in a row and had counted them herself, out loud, and had then not asked for his number. He thought, maybe it is a different world. He thought, don't be dramatic. He thought, maybe it is, though. A little bit. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. He walked down the hall toward his room, and the carpet swallowed the sound of his shoes, and he did not look back. 11 days later, Ryan Cole was standing in a community garden on the east side of the city, holding a small paper cup of coffee that had gone cold in his hand, watching his daughter dig a hole in the dirt with the serious concentration of a child who had been given a job. It was a Saturday. The garden was one of those volunteer things the city ran in the warmer months, a half-acre lot behind an old school building, raised beds, a handful of families who showed up with their kids on weekends to plant tomatoes they would mostly forget to harvest. His mother had signed Clara up. Clara had informed him, the previous Tuesday over spaghetti, that he was required to attend, and he had looked at his calendar and seen a clear Saturday for the first time in 4 months, and he had said yes. Clara was wearing the blue laces. He noticed. He always noticed. Daddy, this one's for the carrot. That's a big hole for a carrot, baby. It's going to be a big carrot. Fair enough. He crouched down beside her. The dirt smelled the way spring dirt always smelled, wet and metallic and alive. And Clara's hands were already covered in it, brown up to the wrists. And she was pleased about it in a way only a 7-year-old could be pleased about being dirty. Ryan? He stood up. He knew the voice before he turned. Emily Carter was standing maybe 10 feet away, in jeans and a gray sweater, holding a small cardboard tray of seedlings. Her hair was different, pulled back. She was wearing sneakers. She did not look, in that moment, like any version of herself he had seen before. Not the woman in the cream blazer, not the woman at the bar, not the woman who had walked down an airplane aisle with wet eyes. She looked like someone's neighbor. She looked, in fact, slightly embarrassed. The way a person looks when they have accidentally shown up in the same place as someone they were not expecting to see. Hey, she said. Hey. A pause. I'm not. She lifted the cardboard tray as if it explained something. My cousin runs this. She's been asking me to come for 2 years. I told her yes a month ago. Before. Okay. I'm not following you. I know. I just want to. The last time we saw each other, I think I said something similar, and I want to make sure I say it first this time, because otherwise you're going to say it, and then I'll have to agree, and it'll be weird. He almost laughed. Emily. Yes. Hi, she exhaled. Her shoulders dropped. It was the same half-inch drop he had seen on the plane, and he thought, not for the first time, that there was something unexpectedly relieving about watching a person who had spent most of her life holding herself up straight allow herself, occasionally, to stop. Clara chose that moment to stand up. She looked at Emily with the unblinking, unembarrassed attention of a child who had not yet been taught that staring was rude. Who are you? Clara said. Clara. It's okay, Emily said. She crouched down, carefully, the way people crouch when they are not sure if a child wants to be crouched to. I'm Emily. I know your dad a little, not very well. We met on an airplane. Were you his neighbor? For a little while. Yes. Was he nice? Emily looked up at Ryan. Her eyes were doing a thing, a specific, careful, slightly crooked thing that he recognized. He was very nice, she said. Nicer than he needed to be. Clara nodded, the way Clara nodded when she had accepted a piece of information into her small internal filing system. I'm planning a carrot, Clara said. It's going to be huge. I believe it. You can help if you want. But you have to actually help. Daddy keeps letting me do it wrong. I'm not letting you do it wrong. I'm giving you autonomy. He says that a lot, Clara told Emily confidentially. It means he doesn't want to bend down. Emily laughed, a real one, the same unguarded laugh he'd heard at the hotel bar. I'll help, she said. She set the tray of seedlings down. She got on her knees in the dirt. She did not care about her jeans. Ryan watched this happen, the careful, deliberate way she lowered herself, the small wince she didn't quite hide when her knee hit a pebble. And he watched Clara lean in toward her, showing her the depth of the hole, the seriousness of the project, and Emily listened the way she had listened to him on the plane, with the full attention of a person who had apparently, somewhere in the last 11 days, decided that listening was going to be something she did with her whole self now. He stepped back. He did not want to interrupt. He drank the cold coffee just to have something to do with his hand. After a while, Clara ran off to another bed to investigate something involving a worm, and Emily stood up slowly, brushing dirt off her jeans, and came over to where Ryan was standing. They did not look at each other for a moment. They looked at Clara. She's good, Emily said. She's good. She looks like you. I'm sorry about that. Emily smiled. Ryan. Yeah, the deal went through. How do you... I didn't look it up. It got mentioned in a thing I read yesterday. I didn't go looking. It went through. Congratulations. Thank you. A long silence, comfortable, the kind of silence two people can share when they have already done the difficult speaking. Emily. Yes. I'm going to be home more now, for the next year or so. That was the point of the deal. I'm trying to stop being a voice on a phone for her. That's good. Yeah. That's really good, Ryan. He looked at her. I don't know what this is, he said. You showing up here. I don't think it means anything, actually. I think it's a coincidence. I think your cousin runs a garden and you came. Yes. But I wanted to say, if I ran into you again somewhere, if it wasn't a coincidence the next time, if it was, a choice. Yes. I wouldn't mind it. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay? Okay. I wouldn't mind it either. They didn't say anything else. She walked back over to where Clara was holding up a worm the size of a shoelace, and she made the correct appreciative face that the worm deserved, and Clara declared her a worthy adult. And the afternoon went on. Ryan stood in the sun with his cold coffee and watched his daughter explain the careful difference between good dirt and bad dirt to a woman who 11 days ago had implied to a flight attendant that he didn't belong in a cabin he had paid for, and he thought about the shape of it, the strange, crooked shape of how people sometimes became something other than the first thing they showed you. He had been, for a long time, a man who did not believe in second chances, not because he was bitter, because he had spent 10 years building a life out of the fact that most people didn't get them, and he had made peace with that. You got one chance to see a person, and usually the first time was accurate, and the kindest thing you could do for yourself was to believe what they showed you. He was not sure anymore that he believed that. He thought, instead, that maybe the first time you saw a person wasn't a person at all. Maybe the first time you saw a person was just the performance of whoever they'd decided to be that morning, the outfit they'd picked, the voice they'd used, the assumptions they'd dragged along from the last room they'd been in. The real person showed up later. The real person showed up when something went wrong, and they had the option of walking away clean, and they walked back instead, down the aisle of an airplane, into a middle seat in economy, into the dirt of a community garden on a Saturday in spring. Most people never walked back. That was what he had gotten wrong, maybe, for all those years. He had thought the lesson was that most people were what they first showed you. The lesson, actually, was that most people never went to the trouble of showing you anything else. It was too hard. It cost too much. It asked them to be wrong in public. The ones who did were the ones worth knowing. The ones worth knowing were rare. They were worth waiting for. And sometimes, if you were lucky, if you kept your eyes open, if you were willing to be surprised, they walked back into your life through the side gate of a community garden, holding a cardboard tray of seedlings, with dirt on their knees and no apology on their lips, and they knelt down next to your 7-year-old daughter and helped her plant a carrot. Daddy! He looked up. Clara was waving him over. The worm was gone. A new project had begun. Emily was on her knees again. She was laughing at something Clara had said. She did not look, in that moment, like a woman who had ever owned a cream-colored blazer. "Coming, baby?" He set the coffee cup down on a bench. He walked over to his daughter and to the woman kneeling beside her, and he knelt down too with his back complaining about it, and he put his hands in the dirt, and he joined the work. Above them, the sky was a pale spring blue, the kind of blue that has been empty of weather for a week. A plane passed overhead, high, silent, small as a fingernail. He did not look up at it. He did not need to. He was exactly where he had been trying, for 10 years, to get to. And that, he understood, was the whole story. That was the whole thing. If this story reached you tonight, if you felt it anywhere, I hope you carry one thing away from it. The people sitting next to you, standing behind you in line, riding the same elevator as you, wearing faded jackets with hearts drawn on the sides by their children. You don't know them yet. You only know the costume they put on this morning. The real person shows up later, if they show up at all. Be someone who shows up, and be someone who lets other people show up too. That's all. That's the whole thing. Thank you for staying with me until the end.